Good evening, and the Hoover Board of Education meeting is now called to order. So if you choose, please join me in a moment of silent prayer. Thank you.
Please stand for the pledge. Salute, pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know this is the last board meeting before the holiday season, and I hope everyone has bought everything they're going to buy. I don't seem like it. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We're going to make one modification to our agenda. Due to a wreck that's on 31 4th of the 9, we may have some students that shall be recognized that fallen is a tad bit behind. So we will move the recognition piece below public participation, and we'll just modify it as we go, because I definitely want to give that recognition to our students for their hard work. Board, you have before you today's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda has been moved. Now we will go to our public participation. See, yes, sir.
How y'all doing this evening?
Fantastic.
Good, good. My name is Steve Hurst from the Bluff Park area. I've got a few questions that pertain to rezoning. If y'all would be interested, or I'll be willing to answer the questions. The first one is about some of the documents that were uploaded to the rezoning website. The reference, or it's the court transcripts from the February 20th hearing with Department of Justice. Are you familiar with the hearing, Mr. Lipscomb? Okay. I'm just looking for some clarifications. There's several comments in there about a meeting that took place on the previous day, February 19th. There were some documents that were presented by Mr. Cropper. I was wondering if that's something that could be made available to the public. Who was at the meeting February 19th? If that's something that we could have some more information on.
Well, let me ask you a question first. How do we want to handle this? I know Dr. Murphy wants to give a report here later on in the process. Do we want to write these questions down, get them back out? Because we may have more questions tonight, and how do we want to do this?
Well, as I understand public participation, it is to share a position. It is not necessarily a venue that you come to the microphone with a list of questions for the board.
Right.
So from that end of it, I would be happy to take down your questions.
Okay. Right.
Mr. Sweeney is in the room with us. I do know that based on anything Mr. Cropper may have shared with us, there is attorney-client privilege that could come into play, as this is a lawsuit for which we're a part of. So, Mr. Sweeney, I'd have to defer to you as legal counsel at this point if there are any questions about documents that might be specific to the pending or the lawsuit specific to rezoning.
I think our protocol has always been, thank you for your questions. We'll take them under advisement and get back with you after some deliberation. Dr. Murphy has asked me to make a presentation tonight about where we're at and what the process is. I'm not sure that my presentation will answer all your questions, but why don't you follow the suggestion of the superintendent to share with us things that you'd like a response from.
And let me make this comment. In no formal way, if regardless of what topic we're talking about, if there are questions out there, I would prefer having a more of a meaningful response than to respond in this setting, because I think it gives a half-baked answer. And you understand, so please don't take it in the wrong way, I hope.
Sure, I just thought this would be a good opportunity. There's a lot of people in here that have a lot of information.
Right.
This is a good opportunity for a lot of people to hear answers, rather than just a one email going to the rezoning and coming back to one person. By asking questions publicly, we have the opportunity to share a lot of information with a lot of people.
Well,
I think that's why Dr. Murphy asked me to make a presentation, somewhat of a wraparound statement tonight about where we're at and what we expect to happen.
Would there be an opportunity for public participation after your presentation?
well, any questions, let's talk to Dr. Murphy afterwards. I guess any way possible, we can put somewhat of a summary out there so everyone can see. I mean, what is the best? I just want to make sure we answer the questions.
With
I
your,
would
with
say
your
a couple
permission, I
things.
would suggest, Mr. Hertz, ask what he would like, follow-up information, and we'll get back with him in turn. But we are going to present information that we think is relevant to the general concerns of the
Right.
community.
Any comment, Dr. Murphy, or is that?
I think that's fine, like
Okay.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
So if there are other people here that have questions after the presentation, I think there are, what would be the best, to email the questions to Hoover rezoning, or?
Yes, that's why that's been set up.
Thank you. Any more public, yes? Kurt,
You said statements are okay, right? Statements, not questions, okay. Good, just want to make sure I'll drop the questions out. My name is Kurt President, if I can get this down right. Stephen will put on me. I have 2 children in Bluff Park. I wanted to make a statement about, you asked for feedback. And it's not a question, it's a statement about it, and maybe you can clear it up in your presentation. Since July of 2014, this is the 5th iteration of a plan for rezoning. Now, I realize that this is your first, Dr. Murphy, but the 5th, if you go back to Andy's original plan, this is the 5th time. To get to that 5th plan, he had to have 2 months of people going back and forth with questions, answers, different looks at different parts of the plan. I honestly think we need time to get to know each other. We, not you guys, we know each other, but as far as, what are we gonna do with things like a budget deficit? You saw that email from Mr. Bradley about a long-term plan, getting everything together in one group, a strategic plan, which is something that Mr. Craig put forth in January of 2014. I'd like to see that, because I just don't know that, right now we're providing you feedback, and a lot of it is asking you questions about that 220 document, different things like that. We're not asking concrete questions about the plan, because we don't have one, and when we do get one, there's different mechanisms to do that, but I worry that if that's in January and you're going to vote on it in February, that's kind of a tight time frame. So what I would suggest is, we were able to get a motion to extend the deadline to file those backlog reports, correct, the 2010, 2011. If we can do that, can we get a motion from you on behalf of the parents to delay this, to let us talk about it as a community, talk about it openly, perhaps look at this plan, and give it a couple of months, not a couple of weeks, to get this to the DOJ, get their approval on it, get it to our people, and get our approval on it. Is that possible?
Let me respond to that later.
Okay,
During
fair enough.
report, yeah.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Suppose. Any additional public participation?
I'll try to keep this not as a question.
Okay.
My name is Corbin Camp. I too live in Bluff Park. I have 2 students in the Hoover system. One is a rising senior, and I have very real concerns that the rezoning plan is being put above the safety of our students, particularly high school students that might have to drive not 5 miles, not 6, 12 miles each way. In traffic like this that we were just before had to adjust the agenda because of a traffic accident. I'm very concerned that the speed that this is coming out is not even considering that fact.
What do you base that on? What do you base it? It's all conjecture on your part.
12 miles, that's a fact.
You got this inherent fear. What's it based upon?
The fear that you have, my son wrestles at Spain Park High School in the off season. I've had to drive that, make that drive a lot of times. I think it's unreasonable to expect our students to have to do the exact same thing, especially ones that have 1 year left at Hoover High School. I don't know if the grandfathering consideration has really been taken into effect. I've sent an email, I didn't get anything back.
My point exact, you can speculate outcome home based upon where you sit and how you feel, and that's perfectly fine. I don't know anything, there's nobody at this table, this school board attorney doesn't know anything. It's a process that's being evolved. It's a legal suit, a lawsuit. So, I mean, I appreciate your concern. I had the same issue when my daughter was on Spain Park and was built, and I had to deal with that situation. But, you know, the fear factor has got to be managed because it's not predicated on anything of any substance at this point, other than just pure fear alone.
I mean, it's not fear. I have my own experiences of driving on Acton Road in the dark and in the rain. Teammates of my son have already had an accident doing the exact same thing.
Okay.
I fear when you move that many kids immediately over to Spain Park, take out the distance factor. That's extra cost, extra
You
insurance.
said they're going to move kids over to Spain Park.
That has been the rumor. Okay, we can mince words, but that is.
I'm not mentioning words.
Okay.
I'm just asking you straight
If
up.
anybody would like to disagree with me on that,
Well,
I'm just saying that was part of the talk of the last rezoning.
What, everybody else in Bluff Park? I haven't heard that. And I said it on the meeting the other day.
That was on an earlier plan that Mr. Craig had fairly early on.
Okay.
That was part of it. To my knowledge, there's been nothing mentioned since.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's not going to happen because I don't know what the plan is, but I know where it's coming from.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, I'm expressing my concern.
Yes.
That with this plan, that be taken into consideration, because my son drives 4 miles, 12 miles. It's something that can really add up when you start taking young drivers. It's a safety concern.
Understand.
I was privileged to sit on this last session, and this is not of any consequence, but I was absolutely amazed and pleased at the consideration being given for just that point. Minimizing disruption for all students, all families, as best as can be done under what we've been expected to do.
Okay, and I appreciate that, I really do, I just hope that the immediacy if it could be gradualized, at least the adjustment would be easier on not just me, but everybody else here that has that same concern.
Right, and I believe the 5 community meetings we had, parents addressed that concern. I'm a parent as well, so we have concerns as well, but I would want everyone to kind of go through the process. Again, no plan has been developed. And when that plan comes out, I'm sure this board will have plenty of questions as well for that. So I know it's concern and it's warranted, and I understand. So please don't understand this board doesn't understand. So I really appreciate your questions. They will see Dr. Murphy writing them down, and we will address.
I appreciate that.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more public participation? Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment that this is the first meeting I've been to that we've not been allowed to ask questions and get responses back from this group. And I just kind of wanted to put that out there, that is a concern that I have, that been to many board meetings in the past and we've been allowed to ask questions and get responses, and now it seems like when we have such an important issue on the table that we're being asked to just make a statement and not be allowed to ask questions and get responses.
What's your name, just?
Lori Redding. I live in Bluff Park as well. I have 2 kids that go to Bluff Park Elementary.
Well, let me see if I can frame this up for you. First of all, the the whole board meeting concept is wax and wane. This is a business meeting, that's why there's agenda posted, things are relevant to the agenda. Second of all, superintendent has put up a means for asking questions and taking in feedback. This is not, there are people here, there are a lot of people here, but everybody's not here. Everybody who's interested in the issue is not here. This is not the forum for Q&A.
In your opinion, correct?
No, by virtue of the way the board meeting is structured,
This is the
and it's a
first-
business function.
Sure, and I understand, I've been part of many board meetings in my career, and do what I do as a professional. And this is just the first time that I have been here and heard that we cannot ask questions. And so that's the only reason I just wanted to make that comment, that we're just supposed to send the email and get an email response back. I still just wanted to put that on the record.
Let me make this statement to that. Over time, I wouldn't exactly say that. I mean, we definitely allow questions in this particular topic, because there's so many questions still lingering out there, and we don't even have a plan per se. So I think that we can get in here and be in here a whole hour, an hour and a half, just questions through. And I think that the most logical way is to kind of give Dr. Murphy those questions and for her to respond back and have time to sit back and think about them in a sense. So I don't want anyone to leave here with the board. You can't never come and ask questions about topics, but in respect to this particular item on the agenda, it's a little bit different.
And and I hear what you're saying, I just
Yes.
wanted to put that out there, that it's just different than what we've experienced in the past. And I think that would have been a nice piece of information to have before we came, so maybe we could prepare statements for the board instead of having to come with a list of questions. Because it does take a lot of time to get those responses back.
Right.
I mean, I've had a question sit out there since the early part of December where I have put in a request for records, and I still haven't heard back, or I have not heard a response for that. So this is going on 2.5 weeks. So that's frustrating for me as a parent, wanting to get information back that long when something this important is at the forefront for all of us. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional public participation? If no more, Dr. Dutz?
We have a number of teachers and students to celebrate tonight. I hope that the traffic is cleared up. Getting a yes from Mr. Gene Grosso. Mr. Gene Grosso, would you come on down? And want you to be down here for all your teachers and kids to be here. We have 3 groups from Spain Park High School that we'd like to recognize this evening. The first group is the Spain Park High School Law Academy, also known as the Judicial Jags. I love that name. And the teachers are Libby Day, Craig Thompson, and Philip Pate. If you'd come down here with your students, we'd like to recognize you. Thank you. Awesome.
Mr. Sweeney, you aren't hiring tonight, are you?
Very good. Yeah, I thought you could say a little bit more. They were featured in the Over the Mountain Journal recently for their for both state and national mock trial competitions. So that's why we brought them before you today. But I thought you might want to say a few more things about your kids.
I'm Libby Day. I'm one of the directors of the Law Academy, along with Craig Thompson and Philip Pate. Our students this year have been extremely successful. Several of these students were on the first place team at the state level competition. This is 4th year in a row that they have achieved that. And then those students will represent the state of Alabama at the National High School Mock Trial Championship, which this is our 5th time in 6 years representing the state of Alabama and our 4th consecutive year doing so. These students also competed at the Empire City Mock Trial Invitational in New York, which 40 teams from around the world were selected to compete, and they did very well. And one student, Senior Bailey Letter, was recognized as an outstanding attorney. She's one of the top 10 student attorneys in the world. So, so it's very impressive, and we're very proud of them.
Very impressive, very impressive. This is the Law Academy was one of our charter student career academies. that began here at Hoover City Schools, first at Hoover High School, and then it's great to see the concept carrying on at Spain Park High School as well.
Mr. Dodson, if you just allow one short statement, all bias to the contrary, the legal profession is a satisfying profession to be in.
And so it's a roll on the record, Mr. Stewart. Thank you, sir. And now we would like to recognize Rachel Cunningham, a swimmer from Spain Park High School. Rachel, come on down, along with Mr. Kellogg, athletic director at Spain Park High School. Rachel is the two-time Alabama High School Athletic Association champion in both the 200-meter individual medley and the 100-meter breaststroke, setting school records in both of those events. And Mr. Kellogg wrote of Rachel, he said, "Rachel is a model of class, character, and sportsmanship that truly embodies the student athlete." So thank you, Rachel, and her mom, for what you've done, your athletic events, as well as your scholastic efforts. But congratulations.
Would you share information? I believe she's going to.
No, absolutely.
This summer, if you would let him brag about one other thing about her.
That is true. Rachel is, she's a model of class and citizenship and scholarship. She has a 3.6 grade point average. She does a tireless event that not a lot of people know about until the Olympic Games get here, which ironically, Rachel's times in her events have qualified her for the Olympic trials, which will be held this summer in Omaha, Nebraska. So we could be impressed.
Thank you, sir. And finally, from Spain Park, we have a pretty big group, but it's an awesome group. The Spain Park Theater Group. So Mr. Michael St. John, the teacher, come on down, sir, with your kids, the whole crowd. Spain Park Theater Group recently competed at the State Trumbauer Theater Festival, which is the big show for theater in Alabama, at least, and other states across the area. And these kids brought home just a bucket load of honors. I'm going to read through these real quick. First of all, they had an original one-act play that they presented called Pals. It was Best in Show, and this was the 4th year that Spain Park High School received the Best in Show for one-act original shows. You guys raise your hand and wave as I call your name. Leah DeBerry, best costumes for that show. Leah. Max Johnson was Best Actor in Pals. Jacob Salat, is that right? Salat. And Macy Rowland were in the all-star cast. So congratulations to that group. As well as performing in that ensemble event, we also had a number of individual and duets. Leah DeBerry again won first place in novice playwriting. So wave your hand, Leah. Back to her again. Macy Rowland was first placed in varsity solo comedic female musical. That's a mouthful, but awesome. Ashley Johnson, first placed in novice stage management. Cassidy Johnson, second place in varsity sound design. Adam Gilliland and Max Johnson, third place varsity duet pantomime. Morgan Geralds and Lauren Bryan, third place varsity duet comedic readers theater. Adam Gilliland and Ethan Parrish, third place varsity duet comedic contemporary acting. And Ben Pinehart,
That's it.
third place varsity scene design. All right, and singer Noah Jacobson, where are you? There you go.
Jambon.
Oh, Jambon, thank you. Noah Jambon awarded a $1,000 scholarship from the Alabama Conference of Theater. So to these students and everyone as a whole troop, congratulations. Mr. St. John, you want to share anything else?
This is, like he said, this is the 4th year in a row that we placed first or second. I know we were here last year with you guys, right before we went to SETC. We're declining the opportunity to represent the state this year. We're taking the original work to the Atlanta Fringe Festival next summer. So we'll be there again. But I'm proud of these kids. 6 of the last 7 years, they've finished either first or second in the state. So we got some really good kids.
Outstanding. just been informed that Mr. St.
Tell him to
John
break a
was
leg.
recognized
That's
as
it.
the secondary teacher of the year at the Trump Battle. It goes to you. Finally tonight, from Hoover High School, the man himself, Don Hewlin. Would you come see us for a minute? Mr. Hewlin is always up here as we recognize the great teachers and kids at Hoover High School, but tonight we're here to recognize Mr. Hewlin himself. On January 16th, Mr. Hewlin will be delivering the keynote address on the Hoover High School technology story to the West Tennessee Education Technology Association, and he will also be presenting a workshop on Hoover High's Global Learning Initiative. So thank you for spreading the good news, Mr. Hewlin. Congratulations. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the parents and family that came to be with these kids.
Thank you, Dr. Dodson. Next, we have recognition, Trace Crossen, Assistant Principal, Amanda Stone, and Dana Joyner.
Good afternoon. We're happy to be here tonight. My name is Amanda Stone. I am the assistant principal at Trace Crossings Elementary. This is Dana Joyner. She's the STEAM facilitator at Trace Crossings Elementary. We just wanted to say thank you for your support in our STEAM and Maker movement. Also, Brian Phillips was here. Where's Brian Phillips? Stan, and I think Kelly Lane. Okay. Just the support you've given us and the evidence and the impact of learning that's taken place at Trace and what they're doing is absolutely amazing. I know some of you were out last week during our Hour of Code, but it's more than just a week of Hour of Code or technology. We have project-based learning activities going on. We have cutting edge technology there. We have problem solving, the math, the science. So we began to make something that, well, we actually had a project-based lesson with first grade, and it turned into something a little bit bigger that Ms. Joyner is going to explain to you.
Thank you for letting us deliver our holiday card to you. Our first grade team did a project-based learning on light as part of the curriculum, and as a culminating activity that all the students participated in, they created the Making Your Holidays Bright and delivered to our feeder schools on Friday as our Christmas cards to them, and a way of saying, you know, we just are all in this together. And we chose to deliver to the board and have one going to Brock's Gap from our fourth grade students as they feed into that school. So just thank you for everything. Thank you, Brian. And curriculum department, we really appreciate it. It's been an amazing year. And just our thank you and Merry Christmas.
Please check out the pictures. The pictures in the card are actually the kids working, so you can see the evidence and the impact of learning that I'm talking about it, that are posted with the clothespins.
Board members, I had an opportunity to visit for about an hour and a half last week during the Hour of Coding, and so unbelievably impressed with kindergarten children. All of the children, each of them had different activities and projects and skills that they were sharing with me, and actually it was Thursday. I started to skip DOJ and stay with them, but it was such a great event and an opportunity to see very young children very engaged in science, math, technology, and engineering, so kudos to you all. Thank you. Yeah. But you're gonna give me some money.
You have before you minutes from the regular board meeting of November 9th and also call board meeting December 4th. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item before you, personnel action. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Any questions from the board?
I would like to make the board aware that as we have looked at personnel, we realize that one of the things that is incumbent upon us is to make sure that we're very careful through the process of looking at personnel. So anytime you see on the agenda a new position, we'll be happy for us to talk about that. But I would also like for the board to know that as we were giving thought to non-instructional support in transportation, we had 3 individuals or 3 positions that we were looking at filling there. But we gave great thought to how we might redesign some routes, and Melody and Barbara Mayer and others sat at the table, and so we were able to save, if you will, not adding some new positions that we gave some thought to, because we looked at redesigning some routes and some other things that we could do to prevent having to bring those 3 recommendations to you. So there is one request for a non-instructional aid on a bus for transportation for a student. But I will always be happy if you see a new position being posted to talk about why that would be on the table.
Any other comments? If there are no more comments, do I have a motion to approve personal action?
So moved.
Oh, we did that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Personnel report has been approved. Next on our agenda is our business action items. Do I have a motion to approve our business action items?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions from the board? There are no questions. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Business action items have been approved. Next on the agenda, proposed policy change. Do I have a motion to approve?
Can I ask a question about that? Well,
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions from the board?
I was looking at the executive session policy. Where did that come from?
As members of Alabama Association of School Boards, we get a document every year called Policy Pipeline that helps us capture the activity of our legislators, and particularly those pieces that are appropriate for us, and they use anything that comes out of the legislators that impact schools, they vet those with those attorneys. And so that was legislative and then vetted with school board attorney for the policy pipeline.
The reason I ask is because it states in there that whenever an executive session is called, there has to be an explicit reason given for the executive session, which indicates the way it's written, a public reason. And I know there are limitations as to what you can say and what you cannot say as opposed to the purpose of the meeting. And the way it's written, to me, sounds very open. For example, if you had a real estate transaction or something critical involving negotiation, you should not be having to say the specificity of that.
Right, and Mr. Sweeney, you might help me here, but I think if it's good name and character, it's basically you say good name and character if it's a matter related to real estate, not that you would have to get into the specifics.
Oh, I get it, but the way it's written doesn't imply that. It implies you need to tell you need to state why it is you're gonna meet in executive session. My interpretation.
Mr. Cooper, could you tell me exactly what we're looking at the meeting number?
Board meetings, the special call 2.5.3. It's the very first,
2.5.3. Together with the state we never, Donald, you never, for example, if it's let's just say it's a student issue or a personnel issue, you don't tell somebody in advance of the meeting to bias the meeting.
That's correct.
here indicates you can do that.
We always deal with that.
Let's define this now.
Okay.
2.53, special call meeting,
All right.
is that the same as executive? Yeah.
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
Executive session would be something that you might have as a result of a special call meeting, but a special call meeting is to address anything that's very time sensitive. And on your agenda for the special call meeting, it might provide to go into executive session, and the executive session usually has a certificate of compliance that's just addressing categorical allowance under the Open Meeting Act.
I misinterpreted a special call meeting versus executive session.
And I went right there with you too.
Any additional questions?
Is it, so the policy for our executive session is still valid? There's been no one, I guess? There's been no, you haven't seen any changes, I guess?
No, I have not.
And while we're on the subject, can you clarify for me the specific boundaries relative to what's said in executive session and where that information can be communicated beyond that point?
It should be absolutely confidential, with no notes taken, no reference to the nature of the conversation. If it is to mature into some kind of board action as a result of that, then it has to be done in the open portion of the meeting. So you're going to have a special call meeting where you have an executive session. If it's personnel, good name and character, whatever, you can have a discussion in executive session. But when you come back out, you don't reference anything that took place. The conversation has to be with regard to some motion or action or no action.
In other words, what transpires in executive session stays in executive session.
That's correct. And that's to ensure absolute confidentiality, absolute frankness, and absolute discretion, so that nobody's legal rights might be collaterally damaged as you have a preliminary discussion about something.
Board members, I'd like for you to also know that Dana Clements, our UNISERV director, has had an opportunity to review these. We have shared these policies out with our principals for any thoughts or input they might have. And we've had these policies before you now for a couple of months. And in meeting with my staff today, we realized that there are some other updates that we need to make from some previous legislative sessions. And we hope to have all of those policies to you in January for your review and hopefully your approval in February, and get ourselves up to date on our policy manual in compliance with all of our legislative action over the last several years.
Is there any move afoot to re-look the entire policy manual? It's been, what, 7, 8 years, I guess?
2009.
I know that we worked, I believe, with Melissa McKee, and it's my understanding at this point, Mr. Cooper, that if we stay on top of those policy pipelines, if you will, that we are aligning ourselves with at least the advice of the Alabama School Board Association. So we updated it 7, 8 years ago, and then as we stay on top of that policy pipeline, that we should have the most current policies in place as it relates to our board's work.
Yeah, but I would submit that in large part that perhaps the policy pipeline was only taken into account on your arrival. Now, I'm saying there's been a lapse.
Right.
And there's probably a lot of housekeeping that
Right,
needs to be
and that really was what I was referencing when I said in a staff meeting today, we've taken a look at the fact that we are behind, if you will, a bit on some of those legislative sessions, and we're hoping to have that updated. Brian Phillips has done a lot of work in that direction for us to pull the policy pipeline legislative meetings into current policy, and we're hoping that we'll have that for you in January, and we'll highlight what's new, what's added, what needs to be updated. And so hopefully in January you'll have that, and hopefully in February, upon your approval as a board, we'll have ourselves updated.
Dr. Murphy?
Yes.
Just clarifying, this was proposed or placed on the agenda at not the October board meeting, is that
Yes.
correct?
That's, I think you've had it in front of you for a couple of meetings. Yeah.
Any additional questions? No further questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Policy changes have been approved. Next on the agenda, instructional support contract. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any questions from the board? Dr. Murphy? No. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion has been approved. Next on the agenda is legal counsel.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, please, that we employ Bishop Colvin Johnson and Kent to serve as additional counsel for the board.
Motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed?
Motion has been approved. Next on the agenda, informational report. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, board members, I wanted to share some information with you, since the State Department of Education has had an opportunity to review our 2015 financial statement, and you have a copy of that, but we're also going to pull it up if you want to turn that way, or at least for our public's benefit, make yourselves comfortable. Board members and to our public, our FY 2015, we submitted the submission date for the entire school districts throughout the state for year-end financials is due to the State Department on November the 2nd. That is the ending for our fiscal year, which ends September the 30th, 2015. After we submit our financial year-end, that is reviewed by the state, and there is information that is exchanged then between the State Department of Education and the local district. There are uploads that happen at that time, and those uploads include data which may include some reclassification. It may also include some adjustments so that we're aligning with the State Department of Education. When we talk about reclassification and adjustments, I want you to know what that means or what that looks like. An example of reclassification, for example, this year, our catastrophic insurance costs were recorded in our general fund, and we moved that per the State Department of Education's directive to our capital projects. So again, sometimes things in a budget end up being reclassified. It's in one location. It may be adjusted per directives from the State Department to a different location. When we talk about an adjustment, here's an example of an adjustment that occurred this year. We were given credit for some career tech education expenditures that we didn't expect to get. So what I want you to understand is once we submit our budget to the state, there are adjustments that happen, there are reclassifications that happen, and from that you'll find things shifting and moving within different fund accounts. As of December the 3rd, the State Department of Education completed their review of our financial data and gave us a verbal approval on our data. And so
I want to share with you, let's see if I can find my arrow here. Wrong arrow. So I want to remind our board that when you look at our financials, and we gave you our financials in September to close out, or in November for our September, and what you had in front of you is slightly different, and I want you to understand why it's different. When you look at the very first, okay, something happened. Oh, please excuse me as I moved my hand and did something strange. So what you'll see is that our revenue, our total revenue was $210,465. Is there any more light over here? Is there an overhead light or anything here? I feel like I'm in the darkness here. I don't know if that'll help me or not. Maybe, old lady, and I need glasses. So I believe that's $163,210. 163 million, thank you, excuse me. 210,485, I believe, and if anybody has a light, I'll take it over here. Our total expenditures was $165,411,134, and you'll see then that our deficit budget ended up being $1,390,077, and I believe that's 97 cents. So what I want you to realize is that we did have $1.3 million deficit. And I also want you to understand why we had that particular variance. So we can get to our next slide. So board members, if you'll also remember, and you're aware of this process perhaps from previous conversations, but our expenditures in FY15 exceeded our revenue by $1.3 million. That was the slide we just shared with you. The approved budget had projected us to spend $9.84 million more dollars than revenue received, and that's a difference of $8,045,000. Because we deferred some projects, because we had some unexpected income, and because there was less than anticipated cost in some columns, our actual was better than we anticipated. And I want to give you some examples of what that really looks like when you look at our budget more closely. We had $1.4 million deferred of capital projects. So we get capital money from the state, and we as a board design a capital outlay plan, or you approve a capital outlay plan. There are those occasions when we do not use that capital outlay money, and so we did not this last year. And so rather than spending $1.4 million in capital projects, we deferred that, and thus there's an extra $1.4 million in our budget. We talked about purchasing buses. We did have a little delay because we didn't meet some specs, and because of that timing on the purchase of those buses, it did not get into our FY 2015 budget, and as a result you have a $1.2 million deferral for bus purchases. Now that money has now been expended in FY 2016, but actually is reflected as a savings in the budget for FY 2015. We also projected utility costs to be about $500,000 more than it actually came in last fiscal year. We also had $1.6 million of personnel costs less than anticipated, some positions that didn't fill, or some salaries that weren't at the levels that we anticipated. So we had a personnel cost savings there. We also had allocated $7 million to technology, and we did, we had over $7 million, but of the allocation that we received or set aside in that budget, $700,000 in technology was not spent. We also received from our city, from Hoover, about $345,000, so a little over, about $345,000, I believe, is what we received from them. We also had some E-rate money and some other miscellaneous revenues that came in to us to the tune of about $300,000. And then we had 2.5 million favorable adjustment in the year-end accrual for salary. And this is based on a process that, should you want some additional information, I'll probably pitch that out to Kathy, and it is specific to when we start school, and so we can talk more about the accrual. But the total here is $8.5 million. So we thought we would be probably a deficit budget of $9.84 million projected, but because of those deferrals, because of those unanticipated revenue sources, this is the actual that you have. I want you to see some revenue comparisons in millions of dollars. So when we look at fiscal year 2009 as an example, our actual foundation money was 47.1, and this is all in millions. And if we had been funded in 2009 comparable to 2008, we would have gotten 55.6 million. That's the difference that 1 year between 2008 and 2009 meant to our school district. So had we been funded at 2008, we would have received $55.6 million. Our actual ad valorem in 2009 was $65.3 million, and the minimum 2% annual growth, there's no growth that you see there, it's the $65.2 million. And the reason that column is consistent only on that first 2009 is because we did see more ad valorem in 2009 than we saw in 2008. So thus why you don't see any growth there, because we actually made more in 2009. But then if you follow this chart, you'll see our actual foundation money that comes to us from the state, what that money would have looked like if we had been able to be consistent with 2008. But hey, we get it. We're not consistent with 2008, but it does give us a point of reference. You see our actual ad valorem money, and then you see if we had been able to maintain a minimum 2% annual growth rate on ad valorem, what that would look like. Now, why did we pick 2% minimum ad valorem? Because we feel like that was a historical basis for what that looked like. Matter of fact, it had actually looked more than a 2% growth, but we use that as just sort of a safe spot to say if we were there. If you'll follow that down to 2015, you'll see our actual foundation money was $58.9 million. If it had been consistent with 2008, we would have been at 62.3. You see our ad valorem of $66.8 million. And our minimum 2% annual growth, had it been there in place, would have been 73.5. Perhaps the most telling is if you go all the way down to the bottom and see what the difference is for this school district based on foundation, where we were in 2008, the lack of not being able to stay there, to also look at any growth that we could have had with ad valorem if it had been consistent with 2%. And if you look at the difference at the bottom, it's $85.6 million difference from 2008 to current, where we are at this time. And so what I want you to also see is our revenue to enrollment. In 2008, we had 12,397 students, and that gave us a revenue per student of about $13,715. But if you will follow that enrollment line, you'll see that our enrollment has increased from 2008 to 2016, which is our 2015-16 current year, where we currently have 13,846 students. But if you'll also look at the red line, which is our revenue per student, you'll see we decreased in revenue per student from $13,715 to $11,325. So as our enrollment has continued to increase, our revenue has decreased, and thus when you look at revenue per student, you see that decrease has occurred. I want you to see a historical review of actual excess expenditures over and under our revenue. In FY 2015, we were at $1.39 million less, or spent more expenditures than revenue that came into us. But if you look historically, with the one outlier being FY 2011, you see some significant expenditures over revenue historically for us as a school district. So FY 2014, 7.89 million. You can follow that all the way down. And if you go to the bottom, you'll see that we've had a $50.5 million expenditure over revenue over the course of this year, about 7 years, 2, 4, 6, 7 years. So we've reduced our fund balance by approximately $50 million since 2008. This is just another way to look at it graphically, our actual expenditures. And the red line would be a balanced budget for us. And you'll see the 1.7 million, which was, I believe, we don't have the years down at the bottom, that was 2011, I believe, that we were had our one positive, if you will, budget where we weren't running a deficit. The green line's a trend line. Obviously, we want to be trending in the right direction, and by having a negative $1.39 million, that's still a negative of $1 million plus, but it certainly beats the heck out of the $14.07 million deficit budget that we had earlier. And again, I'm sorry those years are not there. I want to just talk as we're moving forward about some thoughts and some ideas, and also to embrace thoughts and ideas that you might bring to us. First of all, I believe as a school district we need to establish a targeted fund balance for our school district. What is that balance for which we know we do not need to go under? And I think we need to be very thoughtful about that. We need to think about how we do not dip lower than would be prudent of us. We also have a committee that is, Dr. Dotson chaired that committee, that has done some sustainable staffing for us. That committee had a very difficult task, and they've told me they did not enjoy serving on that committee because they were actually having to look at ways that we were going to reduce our finances in our school district. And so they looked at sustainable staffing. How might we go forward making sure that we have the staff in place that is sustainable by this school district over time. Also a focus on concentrations of locally funded employees and assess our optimal needs. We do, by choice, we have carried a number of teacher units above and beyond those that have been allocated to us by the state. One, we've made a commitment as a school district to have smaller classroom sizes. We have lots of additional programs and classes that's been very positive for our students, and all that comes with a price. And but we'll need to look at how we're going to fund and how we can continue to support some of those funds that come above and beyond our state allocation. We need to continue to review our building utilization. We need to seek opportunities to reduce travel in our school district and overtime and other ancillary expenses. And then we just need to give thought to how we might find other sources of revenue to support our children and to support our school district. So, board members, I share this with you, one, if I can back up in time and get it right. I do want you to know that this particular sheet is different than the one that we gave you in November, and it is different to the tune of about a little less than $6,000. And I want you to know it's different because of what we talked about, how we sometimes reclassify or adjustments that's made. And the adjustment that is the difference here is that the State Department of Education allowed us a career tech expenditure that we didn't think they were going to allow us, and so it was a little less than $6,000. So what you were given in November compared to what I'm sharing with you, which is now final, is about $6,000. I will tell you that this particular overhead here, Exhibit F11A, I believe is what that's up in the corner. When this document is uploaded, it is a working document. If this document is pulled at any time during the process of us aligning ourselves to the state, you may see different things in different columns. You may see things moving around, but that's the process of the school district aligning itself with where the state wishes for certain things to fall in different columns or in different funds. So I don't want you to be concerned that when you look at this, and particularly if it's pulled in the middle of the process, then you will see some things that may look very differently. But this is the final. We've been given verbal approval. But I want you to understand, if you will, that this is a process, that this is uploaded to the state. It continues to be a working document as we in the state all work together to align things and get them all in the right columns and in the right fund accounts. So board members, just wanted to make sure that you sort of understand where we are at the end of our FY 2015 process. And certainly we'll entertain any of our board questions if you have those.
Dr. Murphy, can you give a little bit more explanation? We had $1.6 million in overage and budgeted personnel cost and $2.5 million in year-end accrual. How does that happen when we have a set hiring schedule that's turned in by principals and we have a set salary schedule to follow? How do we over budget something by $4 million?
If you would speak to the accrual piece, which is the 2.4 that Mr. Presley's talking about, yes.
One of the processes that we go through is it's one of those places where we are very much more where we are following generally accepted accounting principles, and generally accepted accounting principles require that you look at when expenditures are earned, not necessarily when they are paid. The reason why that becomes a large number for us at year end, sometimes it really has to do with when we start school and how many days there are between the first day of school and September 30, which is our year end. This particular year, we moved back the start, and I'm going to get this, we moved back the start of school. So that gave us fewer days that we had to go out and look and account for payroll for all of our non-12-month people. Typically, we don't see this as a very large number because we're moving up days of the week when school starts. This one, moving a full week, made it to be a larger number. We can't, now when we're going to a 2-year rolling calendar, we'll be better able to anticipate and provide in the budget for those particular situations that may arise. But it is a standard accounting practice. It's not a cash transaction. Teachers didn't get paid any more. They didn't get paid any less. They were paid, their regular, they didn't see any difference in their pay. But we had to convert their 12-month type paycheck back to a 9-month type paycheck and then count the number of days to move that around. So that's where that comes from. It's one of those more technical accounting issues that we bump into from time to time. Regarding the difference in payroll for the of the 1.6 million, we do go through staffing in early spring, and as we go through that process, there are still certain amounts of unknowns that we're dealing with. We try very hard to align those as we go through the year, but it could be that there were vacancies that we wound up not filling. That's been usually the major piece that we have out there. In the budget season, we'll go ahead when we're preparing the budget, and unless a position has been frozen in the system and everybody's agreed we're not going to hire it, we'll go ahead and budget for it because it may be a wait-and-see position for us. And we also will see variances in starting salaries that can make a difference as well. And when your total payroll is your largest percent of your budget, what's even a small variance is going to be a much larger number. So we certainly try to make every effort to minimize that impact. And some years we can get a little bit closer. A lot of years where we have a lot of instability, a lot of turnover, and a lot of new hiring that's going on, it gets to be a little bit more challenging as to when we bring all that data into the budget process. Does that answer?
Board members, do you have other questions? Otherwise, magic's happening up here. Yes.
When you look at your historical review in the past 7 years outside of 2011, it's fairly consistent in terms of 14 million to roughly 8 million. In 2015 appears to be just an anomaly, just because of things like salary accruals and some other deferred expenses. We're going to buy buses. No question about it.
We've already bought them. They'll be in the 16, 17.
What's interesting about it is the deficit spending that's proposed for this year could become exacerbated if the state follows through in this 5% salary increase, which equates to what, $2 or $3 million for the district?
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. So while we're very hopeful that our employees will be the recipient of a pay increase from the state, what we do know is that our employees are paid above the minimum salary schedule. So all of our employees, by virtue of that, are already being paid in part from local funds, above and beyond what the state allocates for those individuals. Everyone in our school district, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, without exception is paid above the salary schedule, thus all that money's local money. So Kathy took the time to calculate what if we get a 3 to 5% pay increase for our employees, and what that will result in is going to be another 1.3 to 2.1 million additional costs for us as a school district, because we'll be paying that additional because we are already above and beyond the salary schedule. So again, kudos if that happens for us, but one of the things that our board and our public should understand is that will cost the school district more money, because that's not a dollar for dollar that'll come back to us from the state. That'll be another significant cost for us. And again, not speaking negative of that, because I'm very hopeful. It's been a long, long time and past due and well deserved, but it does have an impact on our budget.
And it's not optional.
And it's not optional. And then we do lots of other things. Every time we have a national board certified teacher, many school districts, for the $5,000 that they're paid, actually take all of the taxes out of that $5,000 and then give the employee the remaining. We've opted to give all of our national board certified teachers the $5,000, and at the cost of the district, we pay the taxes on that. So we've done some things that have been positive, if you will, and a perk for our employees, if you will, to benefit them, but all of those things come at a cost for us. And are sometimes things that people don't think about when they're thinking of our cost.
When you look at this list of variances that you've outlined here for this past fiscal year, which equate to almost $8.5 million, I mean, I get it. Is there any reason why any CSFO across the state, current or previous, would not understand the same information? Pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would say is that there are huge checks and balances for us. I mean, obviously we go through a financial audit every year. And so that's great review, great scrutiny, great eyes are placed on what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then we have the checkpoint every year when we submit our September 30 statement, and that is that the state is putting a very scrutinizing eye, if you will, on what we do, how we did it, which column, which row, and how much. So there's some huge checks and balances that are alive and well for us, and we respect that process.
Federal programs too.
Federal programs comes in and does a thorough review of how federal funds are used. So.
Well, I know the two Kathys have plenty to do, and I know we asked you to do this for us and kind of explain some of it, so thank you very much. It's been helpful.
Good. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, virtual education option policy. Dr. Ron Dotson.
Yes, sir. You should have a copy of the proposed addition to local policy, which would become instructional program 7.13. This is in keeping with the state legislature's approval of Act 2015-289. which does require us to adopt a policy before the 2016-17 school year to provide a virtual education option to our students in grades 9-12 that can result in the earning of a high school diploma. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for the work of your team in getting this ready. I have the language laid out in the memorandum for the creation of that program. We would ask that this be available for review for the next month and then proposed for action next month. Would there be any questions or things I can address tonight?
I thought you did a great job explaining the mystery of it all. It still exists.
There's still a little bit of mystery, but it's getting a little clearer. Thankfully, so hopefully we'll get a little bit more information and have this ready for January for you. Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, the 2016-17 total school year calendar.
You have in front of you a little folder with some information. The calendar committee was tasked with two main purposes. One was to come up with two drafts, an A draft and a B draft, to offer to our employees across the district for their input, for their preference. In other words, to allow them, for lack of a better term, to vote on a choice that they found would be to their liking. And if you'll look on the pages behind draft A and B, you will see the actual printout of their choices, and I will show this for you. You can see, I think it's overwhelming that our employees favored calendar option A. So you have calendar option A, 2016-17, you have calendar option B, 2016-17, and then the vote. So based on this preference, I would recommend that we put draft option A out for your consideration and feedback, and for public consideration and feedback as well. Mr. Gaston will upload that in the morning, and we have a website, email reply, and we answer those questions. I do that every year, to answer questions and respond to feedback. We've gotten some really good ideas over the years, so it's something I enjoy doing in a strange and twisted sort of way. But we really have had some good feedback from parents. I look forward to hearing what they have to say. The main difference, if you want to look all the way to the back, I did a comparison chart so that you can see the crucial dates down the side of the crucial events, and then how they stack up for the 2016-17 calendar, and then what I'm about to discuss is the 17-18 draft. So that should just give you some idea of where everything falls. The interesting thing about putting together a calendar proposal is that it can never be have your cake and eat it too. We have 180 instructional days necessary. We have 4 professional development days and 4 work days required for teachers. Teachers work 188 days. Students attend class 180 days. Now, the ideal situation is to balance those 2 semesters. That's not so much of a problem for K through 7, but 8th graders take semester exams. And then, of course, in high school, semester becomes quite important when you're talking about balancing not only the curriculum itself, but also the grading process. So we try to, as much as possible, balance the semesters, 90 and 90 to equal the 180 days. But then comes the dilemma. Our community has spoken very loudly and decisively that they would like to have an entire week off at Thanksgiving. And I know some of our sister school systems do not opt to do that. But in the few times that we have attempted to go to school during the Thanksgiving week, I think the word probably debacle fits well. Our teachers are out, our students are out, and we found that those days are just not productive and can be better used elsewhere. So the committee definitely considered the week at Thanksgiving. We've also found that our students have difficulty, I say our students, I think it's probably all of us, have difficulty when we have long stretches of time for instruction without any kind of a break. Discipline incidents rise, learning goes down. You can actually see in test scores. I mean, kids are tired, they're weary, and they need a little break. So we try to build in something every month, a day. Even if it's just a work day for teachers and students are not here, or a professional day and students are out, so that we have just those little snippets of breathers to see us through. Now, when we do that, we end up with plenty of time. Second semester, we are rolling and trolling. First semester, not so much. First semester, to squeeze in everything you need and include Thanksgiving. As you can see, where Christmas falls always impacts the calendar. And then you've got the mandatory holidays. Now, in the state of Alabama, the only two mandatory holidays are Veterans Day and Memorial Day. But we have traditional holidays as well. Obviously, Labor Day is a function there. We have Thanksgiving, we have the Christmas holidays. And then in the spring, we have Martin Luther King's birthday, and we have spring break as well in there. So we're fitting around all of those. And that's a lot of explanation to say that you only can do so many things with the calendar. We try to get a template that works a little bit well, and then tweak it as the years go by. This year is also a leap year, so we're fortunate that we have a little bit extra time as far as in this calendar year, but in the one that we proposed for next year, we had to build that day in. The primary difference between the A option and the B option were in the Thanksgiving holidays, where we cut 2 days out, and in spring break. Every year we go through the discussion on spring break the 3rd week of March, spring break the 4th week of March. Who's doing what, where, and when. We have learned that our community is more closely aligned with the practices of Shelby County than it is, say, for example, with Homewood. Homewood and Mountain Brook tend to align their calendars with UAB break because they have so many people that work at UAB who have teachers in the school and have students in the school. But we've learned that our community generally prefers that 4th week in March, and Shelby County does that, some of the others as well. Usually we're the first person to make the decision. This year I think it was Mountain Brook. So those are those calendars. Move them out. Then Dr. Murphy also tasked us with just looking ahead and coming up with some calendars for discussion for the 2017-18 year. And these are not, as my understanding, up for approval or a vote. These are just to get us started thinking in that direction. And you will see that the 17-18 year, a little unusual, the way Christmas falls, the way some of the holidays fall. There's a good bit of juggling that we have to look at for those, but it follows the same basic pattern as the 16-17 calendars, which are whether or not you have Thanksgiving for a full week or a partial week, and whether or not spring break falls on the 4th or the 3rd week. And of course, the start dates are always of paramount importance. So, do you have any questions about what we have so far?
And we're looking to approve this, January?
The January board meeting.
The 16-17.
And I'm assuming we're gonna put,
It will go
definitely
out.
the 16-17 on our website,
Yeah.
but the 17-18, if we put that out there, and we put like bold print that this is not an actual calendar. 'Cause
And
I-
really, that's the pleasure of the board. We could propose 16-17 and 17-18. I don't know how comfortable we are to go out that far, but, certainly would be willing to propose both. Would obviously like to get our 16-17 budget approved, but we could put 17-18 out there, noting it as a draft and making sure it's watermarked appropriately for everybody's attention.
Board, from my perspective, you and your staff know better about that, and committees you have for that. And a lot of parents plan 2 years out, honestly, especially their senior and junior year, so I will take advice from you on that, unless the board has any comment on it.
I got a question, outside of making people happy, Ron, when do the spring assessments take place?
Typically April.
Well, yeah, I mean, but.
Yeah.
When,
It can vary. Usually it can start as early as the 1st week of April and runs typically through at least the 1st week of May. AP testing will go all the way through the end of May.
For the Spire as an example, I guess the window probably open for first grade.
Typically the week we get back from spring break, a day or two after that, we usually start testing.
And Dr. Smith is on the calendar committee every year, our testing coordinator, district testing coordinator, to make sure that we don't trample on those days.
Well, it's not a matter of trampling, it's a matter of, student development. You know, I mean, the young kids, number one, rolling off spring break, even the fifth graders' anticipation of moving on to middle school or intermediate school, that kind of stuff is a huge distraction, so the earlier test, in my understanding, the better off you are.
Yes, but we do have flexibility with Aspire. In the ARC days, we had to give a certain test at a certain time on a certain day, and we've got a lot more flexibility now in how that is set up. So Dr. Smith works directly with the principals to set that out. If it ever does fall directly on the day kids are back from break, they almost always build in a day or two buffer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm looking at this option A for 16, 17, and you got a week worth of spring break the last week in March, and you showed back up on the 3rd of April, and then all of a sudden you got 2 more holidays, and a very long weekend after only one week and a half back in school. So I'm just questioning the gauge of the kids.
Well, and the rationale for that is that's Easter weekend, and the committee opted to buffer that on the Friday and the Monday, because so many of our students are out of town, quite frankly. And we felt like if we moved it to that later week in April, then it has more of a tendency to impact those AP tests in May.
So we're taking Monday off after Easter off this week?
And those are possible inclement weather makeup days as well.
Are we taking Monday off after Easter? This year?
No, not this year.
I'm just saying, there's a lot of holidays in there, and student engagement in the critical time is important, it's not special.
Any more comment on whether or not we would like to put out the next 2 school years out for approval, or just focus on 16, 17? Again, I'm not assuming, but Dr. Murphy and her staff have went through both. We got response back
No, we
back
have
from
not,
them.
I'm sorry.
No?
We have not responded, I mean, we have not put the 17, 18 out for a vote, because those were just up for consideration as far as to start the discussions on 17, 18. But we certainly can.
So, okay, hold on. So 17, 18, has that been to the committee?
No.
So it has
The
not?
committee.
They've been, the committee, yes.
Yes.
The committee has talked about what they want, but we, as you said, it says consideration review for the next committee, because what we were tasked with is to start looking ahead. If we want to consider a 2-year calendar, this would be what the committee would propose, and we can certainly put out the draft options for the faculty to vote, or we can put them out for input first. I know that Mountain Brook had done a 2-year calendar, and I believe they moved away from that. It's the board's pleasure.
In 2018, we didn't take off the Monday after Easter.
Well, Easter falls at the end of March, at the end of spring break.
You know, April 1st.
And again, you're juggling those days because, those add 2 days to the end. You want to have, as you can see, there are already 91 days in the second semester for that calendar in 89.
How much time would you need for 17, 18 to go to committee for, I guess, approval? To put it back out?
The 17, 18 committee, the calendar committee has already reviewed 17, 18, right?
Yes.
So you just put that out for a vote of our faculty and our staff, just to get their input. We only did 16, 17, but we could send 17, 18 out.
So how long would it take to put that out for?
Send that out tomorrow, leave it out a week or 2, and get feedback.
Okay, so would it be better to, instead of looking at, to approve in January, just push it back to February possibly? So
approving in January 16th, you're not approving 17 in January.
and we were talking about doing that.
But you could approve 16 in January and 17 in February if you so chose. If you wanted to do it, you wouldn't have to approve them simultaneously.
Do we?
I looked at her.
Okay. If you're fine with it, we can put it on the agenda to approve both calendars, however you want to do it. I mean, you let us know.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Any questions? Thank you.
Great job, thank you.
Next, on the agenda is new business. Mr. Kelly, do you have any discussion or topic from, any legislation or policy changes?
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, Judge Graffio declared the act of the 2000, I guess you call it 15 legislature, Act 226 was declared null. I'm just sure I give his word, it declares the act void. That's the 1% tax that passed in May that our local delegation passed. Judge Graffio declared it unconstitutional. That means, this is a big if, that's about $16 million per year for this district that would have been diverted to Jefferson County General Fund with about 1.75 given back. So you see the difference there. Now, who knows what will happen? My guess is that you'll see a bill introduced in the legislature when it convenes next year to try to rectify this. Now, it's possible the state Supreme Court, and there's lawyers in here that certainly know the process, I don't. But if the state Supreme Court reverses it, then I don't know where it goes from there. But this is big news, and I hope that you, as all of us are voters, that you let your feelings be known to your legislators. This is a huge deal. Now, our neighboring communities, I won't name them other than they're over the mountain, for the most part, we're in favor of this to happen. They're not a retail-based community. We were going to be frugal and try to let, hopefully our budget would go out far enough to see this bond satisfied. What they did when we got advanced the $85 million, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Murphy, back in 2007, 2008, we would advance that money. It was basically an advance, and a bond was created to be paid back. So it was set possibly to be paid off in 5 to 6 years. Jeffco Commission asked our local delegation to introduce a bill that gave all that money to the general fund of Jefferson County, which I live in Jefferson County, and I hope it does well. But we need to communicate if possible, and this is a big deal. So I think at this point, I understand AL.com's got an article out on it. I saw it after. I actually got a copy of the entire order if you want to see it right here. So that's good news. We'll see and have confidence in our court system, our state Supreme Court, and ask our legislators to reconsider our district. They have other interests in this area. Mountain Brook, Homewood, Vestavia may think differently than we do. We have to look out for us.
We want it to sunset, right?
Sir?
We want it to sunset.
Yes, we do, and it's a real gray area as to what would happen. Their legal team explained it to me was that the commission could possibly just extend it. You could extend the payouts, you could refinance it, you could cause it to go on and on. We tried to get a target date to say when will it get paid? And Brady, you're talking about some shifting. Ask Mr. Presley. I mean, it would upset you to understand how this came about, but that's more than I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Next on our agenda, superintendent report.
Yes, we had a meeting with our Department of Justice, as we've shared with you, on December the 10th. And during that meeting, we looked at various concepts with the Department of Justice. We talked about our facilities and utilization of our facilities, and the different concepts gave us an opportunity to talk about how we could respect and honor the input that we've gotten from our community, but how we might also be able to meet those expectations of the Department of Justice. We did send a video out last week that shared with our public why the Department of Justice is involved, if you will, and what that timeline with the court might look like. And I did ask Mr. Sweeney if he might share some information from that meeting with us also. Thank you for doing that, Mr. Sweeney.
I'd like to give us a little bit of an overview to explain what we're about as a backdrop to address some misconceptions that are being a source of frustration and worry by earnest people in the community. But I'd like to address three of the issues that have already been brought up today out of sequence. What is it that we're all about? Pending litigation. we have never, in any litigation involving Hoover, ever disclosed early on how the dialogue is transposing with the lawyers. We never do that because a dialogue has to evolve and change with the hope that a resolution will be achieved that meets everybody's interest. But every time a lawyer asks a question, that has implications that somebody may misunderstand. And so we say that's not the time early on for public participation. In this case, when we started the process with the Justice Department and the Legal Defense Fund of the NAACP, we reached a very specific understanding that the dialogue would be confidential, attorney-client communication. We have honored that. We're going to continue to honor that because it helps us facilitate the discussion. And that's the protocol that's followed in other unitary status cases that I've had for a multitude of systems in the state of Alabama, where you're trying to reach some kind of consensus about the matter. Most importantly, what are we at right now in that dialogue? Information gathering. What we did with this meeting last week was I was meeting with the one of the lawyers on the other side, and they were asking for additional information. They were asking for how to weigh certain factors that they couldn't tell from the raw data that had been presented, and we have a dialogue about that. But it's information gathering. I think, Mr. Cooper, you made the statement that why are you assuming that we're adopting a policy that's unsafe? There is no policy that has been adopted at this point. No policy that has been constructed with any definitive aspect to it, because we're, for reasons I'll explain a little bit later, in this working dialogue. You used the term working document. This is a working dialogue with the parties. The timing, an issue was raised this evening about the timing. Judge Hakala, in one of her first addresses about this matter with Jefferson County and Hoover, said too much time has elapsed without achieving unitary status. This is an ultimate priority of her to review unitary status for these two systems with all reasonable expediency. Number two, some of the parties to this procedure are not at all happy with the current configuration of our schools. Not at all happy. They want something done to address them in different ways, and that's part of the dialogue. But as I said, and the other thing is, you board members, Dr. Murphy, parents, say this has gone on so long. Almost 2 years we've been worrying about this, and real estate people, parents moving in, students wanting to know what grouping of their friends and so forth. It is enormously important to the community. But it is a worry for the community that if we can resolve rationally within the time frame that we're looking at, we want to do so. Dr. Murphy and I have had discussions with the parties that a determination by early March is just critically important if we're going to implement any changes for the 2016-2017 school year. Because those changes, if the changes are made, involve every aspect of our school attendance, transportation, faculty assignment, all of those. So we're acutely aware of the timing that has to be in consideration. An issue was made about safety. I think Dr. Murphy, at the various meetings of the community, has outlined that the Justice Department has a criteria of issues that they look at in every unitary status review. That's the criteria they're going to use in our case, as guidelines. And one of the most important features of that is safety. The Department of Justice and the Legal Defense Fund are not interested in coming to the court and recommending something that's going to be unsafe to anybody. And finally, about exchange of information, Dr. Murphy has indicated that if anybody wants to present information in writing to her that they would like for the Justice Department and the Legal Defense Fund to consider, to do so, and that will be transmitted. So we have tried to assure people, if you have things that you want to make sure are on the table for discussion, even during this sensitive period where we're just gathering information, that will be done. It's my impression that the Justice Department and the Legal Defense Fund are tracking this information that's in the paper about this matter as soon as it's published. So they seem to be very apprised of community concern, community interest. Those are kinds of the things that have been raised to this point. But let me go back just to give you, just with your indulgence, just a short overview. Judge Madeline Hacklow was appointed as a federal judge in 2004. One of the mandates that she was given when she was appointed by the United States Supreme Court was to expedite review of those systems that had not obtained unitary status. After she was appointed, she was assigned two cases, the Jefferson County unitary status and the Hoover unitary status. And she has treated those with the same process. She hasn't singled out Hoover, she hasn't singled out Jefferson County. She said, these are my obligations. The Supreme Court has said that I need to determine if Hoover and Jefferson County have removed the vestiges of its prior segregated operation. Now, we all know that that's historical in Hoover, but we came from a system that had a history of segregated dual operation, black and white, and it's her legal responsibility to see that those vestiges have been removed. And I know the board members have heard about the green factors multiple times, but maybe there's some people here that haven't. Those 6 green factors are what the Supreme Court said in Green versus New Kent County have to be determined, each and every one, before a court is enabled to determine if those vestiges have been removed. And those are student assignment, faculty, staff, transportation, extracurricular activities, and facilities. Of those 6, student assignment intersects and affects all of the others. Because until you determine student attendance, you don't know how your facilities are being used. The court doesn't know that. How many faculty of what racial composition are going to be assigned, or the staff, or what the burden of transportation is going to be. So it's just absolutely critical, as Dr. Murphy and her staff are looking at these aspects,
I didn't get that.
that we determine first and foremost that critical aspect. As I said, student assignment determines what faculty and staff are needed, what transportation is required, what facilities are being properly used or improperly used. In this litigation, there are 3 litigants, not just the Department of Justice, 3 litigants, 2 plaintiffs, the NAACP through their Legal Defense Fund, the Department of Justice, and Hoover as a defendant. Judge Hacklow will ultimately make the determination of what we need to do to to be declared unitary in each of the 6 areas. But the parties to the litigation are allowed to come before the court with their view on each of these matters. And because litigation in this area of desegregation, as Huntsville has just recently gone through, is enormously expensive and prolonged. We try to come to an agreement with the parties to the extent that we can on each of the factors. Now, sometimes in the process, the parties will reach unanimity on all of the factors and will draft a consent decree to the judge for her consideration. In other cases, an agreement can be made that, say, several of the green factors have satisfactorily removed all vestiges of prior desegregation, and the parties will submit to the court a proposal that we're partially unitary with regard to those individual items, but that we have work to do on other areas, and that's fairly standard. I have 3 cases right now where we're working through a 3-year plan to achieve unitary status on 2 items that remain under the green factors. So, and finally, if no agreement can be made, for example, if we said we're not going to do anything, it's my judgment that that wouldn't be satisfactory to one or both of the parties, because of the mandate to expedite unitary status with all reasonable expediency, and that would drive us into litigation, which to the extent that we can avoid it by having a fruitful dialogue with the other parties, we need to do so. What we expect to happen with Judge Hackle is what she has just done with Jefferson County. On November 10th, she issued an order with regard to Jefferson County for the parties, same parties that we're involved with, to file a joint report on or before January 30th, 2016, outlining the parties' respective positions regarding the green factors. I think that she's going to very shortly itemize the schedule for us to complete discovery, to make reports to her about where we are, and in the event that litigation is going to be necessary on one or more of the items, she will have already blocked off that time so we won't run into a stalemate at the end and have to necessarily prolong the unknown well into the summer. I give you that background, which I know to the board members is probably redundant, but I'm advised that there has been misunderstanding in the community about a number of matters. That Hoover does not have to go through this process, that we just brought this on ourselves. That this is a fallout because of the transportation issues that were so racking with the community dialogue over a year ago. And these opinions, while earnestly advanced, are just incorrect. What's driving this process is Judge Hackler's mandate from the United States Supreme Court to review Hoover and Jefferson County at this time and at this time to determine where we are in the unitary status process. There are some other questions that have surfaced concerning why we are gathering information and gathering input from the community. For example, we've heard a lot of dialogue recently about why in the world are we looking at overutilization of some schools or underutilization of other schools. Well, why are those questions relevant or important? Well, without that information, as I've just indicated, we can't determine any of the other plans for faculty assignment, faculty assignment, transportation, coursework, and that sort of thing. So when Dr. Murphy's talking with the people in the community, and she's focusing on utilization of these schools, she's doing so because that's the basic building block for all of these other considerations, number one. And number two, it was an issue that was specifically flagged early on by the other litigants in this process. When they surveyed the early data that was submitted, they said, we don't understand some of the some of the school utilizations. That's an area that's of vital concern to them as we're working through it. Well, Dr. Murphy had to familiarize herself not just with the data, but what those issues about school utilization and so forth meant to the community. And she has had an open dialogue and received information at these multiple meetings and pass that on in our discussions. But I think it's awfully important to know and identify school utilization as determinative of 5 other green factors that must be considered. School utilization also has 2 dimensions. The first dimension is how are we currently using our schools, our current population and our immediate projections. But Judge Hackler said, that's not all I want to know. That's not all I want you to take into consideration. And she used a specific example about another school system in this general area that didn't anticipate major subdivisions, major population or demographic changes. And she doesn't like that happened. And so she told us at one of the last status conference, some of the people here tonight, I think were there, that she wants to know about every major significant residential multifamily development in Hoover. So she wants Dr. Murphy and her staff to project not just what we have now, but what we reasonably anticipate in terms of school utilization in the near future. That's very important to us. So to the people that are saying, why in the world are you looking at school utilization, I hope they understand that there are 2 dimensions to that that are so important, not just to Judge Hackler, but of interest to the parties and a vital baseline for us planning with the other parties as we decide whether we can have some agreement, no agreement, have litigation and no agreement. And finally, I want to say that Judge Hackler has many, many important cases. But school desegregation is close to or at the top of her pyramid of concern. When we meet with her, she has studied all of the data. She listens to us in terms of the time-critical aspects of the planning that Dr. Murphy and her staff have to look at. And what she did that was so important, even though she said early on, this is a major critical concern. But I don't want this process to begin when I know that you're about to hire a new superintendent. So she said, I want you to hire the superintendent, let that superintendent have a few months to begin acclimating, and then we'll go forward with a schedule for discovery and so forth. We have told Judge Hackler that if we can't finish all of the discovery that the parties want and all of the dialogue that's necessary by the end of 1st of March, or in that category, that we will be critically impacted. And we know that Judge Hackler is very sensitive to that. We've got an excellent judge that is treating this matter with all the earnest intelligence that we would hope a judge could do. I hope that wasn't too long, and I hope that addressed some of the issues that you wanted.
Thank you. I think it does. Board members, do you have questions for Mr. Swain?
Very good,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Swain.
Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Just wanted to ask a question.
Next on our agenda is our next board meeting, is January 11, 2016, at 5 p.m., and that will be at Trace Crossing. You know, sometime, 5:30, sir. Okay, sorry, 5:30. So, well, I tell you what, definitely don't want to labor the meeting, but want to take just a few minutes for any questions that you would like to ask following Donald Sweeney's presentation.
But we will take them under advisement.
And we'll, yeah, so I apologize for that.
That's okay. I just wanted to get clarification. Mr. Swain, you mentioned something about a January 30th deadline. Was that for reports to be filed by both parties from Jefferson County and Hoover, or was that for a conference that's set between Judge Heigl and those two parties?
No, that has not been applied to Hoover. It's my recollection that that's what Judge Hackler has asked the Jefferson County people to submit. And in an aspect of that, she's going to issue an order that requires us to give preliminary plans to her at some point. And when that's done, that will be after the board has looked at those plans of whatever we're proposing, and they'll be completely public when we submit them to the court. So this process won't remain undercover, but at this point, we just don't have such plans.
One more question.
But again, there's no deadline right now from the judge. We expect her to outline that in the next couple weeks.
One other question. You talked about the unitary status process is what's driving a lot of this. That Judge Heigl is pushing that or having that process go forward. Is part of that process that rezoning has to be part of that?
Yes, that's student assignment is, as I indicated, the green factor that intersects and affects every other green factor. So that has got to be a basic consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A few more questions, if there are any? All right.
Yes. Mr. Sweeney mentioned one of the factors being proposed development and what impact that would have on our school system. I wondered if there was any new information, or is the city or planning and zoning working with Dr. Murphy to provide any information about proposed multifamily dwellings or large developments that are on the horizon so that we can plan and meet the requirements of the court?
Thank you. Mr. House, Mr. Westhoven, and several folks from the city are certainly working with us and keeping us posted. Planning zoning meetings are open and available to the public, and so we're certainly looking forward to having someone at that table for those conversations and to hear those discussions.
And last question.
And along the same lines, how far into the future are they looking on that? Like, just today, they were discussing in the news the 800 unit development going in off of 150. And they haven't broken ground on it, they still got paperwork to complete. Is that something that would go into that? Or are we just, how far into the future are they interested in looking at these developments?
Well, you know, one of the difficulties with that is trying to plan for the what-ifs. So what if there is 900 multifamily dwellings that ends up out on 459? The danger of the what if is, what if there isn't? And then we've tried to, as one parent very eloquently said to me, you know, are you trying to make plans for moving my child to a different school, assuming that in 3 or 5 years there may be 900 apartment complexes here? So it's a little danged if you do, danged if you don't, so to speak, that you want to look for, you want to plan for, and you want to understand what those potential developments look like. But to the extent that we make decisions right now based on what might happen in 3 years, 5 years, there's some inherent danger in that. But you can't ignore the fact that there are at least some proposals out there for subdivisions and multifamily dwellings.
Councilman Lotto, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all of the land in Hoover has already been zoned accordingly, that is currently in the city, and it's just a matter of when that comes online, as far as new homes or multifamily units are concerned?
Yes, and Mr. House can tell us, those which are zoned single family today, how many homes were approved for that parcel when it was zoned. The only thing I would correct you on, Mr. Presley, would be there are certain tracts within the city of Hoover that may still be unzoned, or may be agriculture, or may be any type of zoning that may not necessarily fit with its surroundings, so those have to be taken on a case-by-case basis, and it's rare when those come up, but I would suggest that's the only exception.
Did you go to the meeting tonight?
I'm sorry?
Did you go tonight?
Yes, sir.
And the outcome was, our survey says?
Denied.
I think what Judge Hackler said as she was discussing is not that she wants to be a city planner, but she wants to facilitate a dialogue between the cities and the boards of education, so that something that doesn't happen that's going, if she issues an order regarding unitary status or puts us on a 3-year plan, and we come back the next year and said, oh, we left out 500 students, she's gonna say, gosh, that's not an orderly process. We really need to talk about it. She's not dictating that we have to look 8 years ahead or any particular time. She just wants the process to be intelligent.
Hey, we have,
No, I think you alluded to it, I'm gonna say this, and Craig could vouch if you believe it too, but all parties were not at the meeting we attended, but the dialogue and the people who were there from the Department of Justice and everything about it, I was shocked that everybody's about the same end result. That is what's best for all kids. Now, you'd say all kids is a pretty broad spectrum, and the people from the Department of Justice are some of the most considerate, some of the smartest, insightful, and reasonable people I've ever been around.
But I want to make sure that it's clearly understood. We were exchanging information. They were gathering information from us. There was no definite proposal put forward.
okay. Proposing a final question from the.
Okay, one, it's just a point of clarification. In that 220 document, there were a lot of specifics put forth by the LDF attorney that referenced that transportation, that bus fee, and referenced the presentation, that final rough draft that Andy had. Just 100% certain that is off the table. They will be considering your plan and nothing beforehand.
I'm not in a position to answer that one way or the other. I just have no information on that specific topic. I mean, as far as LDF's concerned.
I'm still a little bit vague. What's the 220 document?
It's a transcript from that meeting on February 20th.
Reference to the date. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And as a reminder, next board meeting, Trace Crossing. Trace Crossing is the next board meeting.
Same time, 5:30.
5:30, not 5. Been a long day. Meeting adjourned.